Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Gaming Mix podcast, your official podcast from analogstickgaming.com. As you can see, a slightly different look from us today. My name is Jordan from analogstickgaming.com, but this time on my right, as he, I don't believe, has ever been before, the founder of Analog Stick Gaming, Jeff. How are you, Jeff?
I've always been right. What are you talking about? No, I'm doing pretty good. I mean, I've been sick, so I'm probably going to cough a lot. I've been sick for the past 3 weeks, so that has been absolutely fun. No.
Has it been the big sick that starts with a C? Is it that one, or is it a different one?
No, it's been horrible. Just had postnasal drip, and then basically that went into a really bad sore throat, and then bad cough, and yeah, it hasn't been great. But today's the first day I'm actually starting to feel better.
Good. I normally struggle with that in the winter months, so I've been quite happy to avoid that for a while here. But yeah, it's been a while since me and you have recorded together. Obviously, if you've been keeping up with the podcast, our last episode was actually a spoiler cast for Deadpool and Wolverine, where our good friend Keith Mitchell from the Outer Haven joined you, Jeff, to talk about Deadpool and Wolverine. And that was a fun episode. Apparently, I got a mention in it as well, so that was fun. Yeah, and then you also appeared on the Outer Haven's Spectator Mode podcast very recently.
Yeah, that's really fun.
Which I've been on before, and that seemed like a fun one where you started talking about the Nemesis system at the end. that was a good episode there. But also, really shout out to the Outer Haven, because the reason we have this different look today is they're actually allowing us to use their StreamYard account to try a few different things. And what we're hoping that will mean is that in the future, we can kind of show you videos while we're talking about certain things on the show and stuff like that. But we still need to figure out those kind of things. So at the moment, we do have this more basic look, and then things will probably change look over the next few weeks here as we start to figure things out. But for now, there has been a big wrestling event recently, Jeff. So I feel like as wrestling fans, we should be talking about it, because if people don't know by now, we are called the Gaming Mix podcast because we don't just speak about gaming. We also speak about entertainment, and one of our forms of entertainment is wrestling. We also had it confirmed today as a little side bit of gaming news, which can connect to this. WWE 2K25 is set for Take-Two's Q4, which means it will release sometime up till April 6th next year, which probably means it's releasing in March again, like it has done for the last few years. So we'll see what happens with that. But let's talk about SummerSlam, shall we?
Sure. So I've got the results up here. I don't have them in any particular order. But we had Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley. This match kind of went, I think, how a lot of people were expecting, and that was that with Rhea kind of becoming the face, it made no sense for Dominic Mysterio to kind of be by her side anymore, because he was going full heel. So he basically interfered after showing that he was on Rhea's side, and he ended up interfering and helping Liv retain the title.
What I found interesting about this one in particular was it's the first time that I can remember in wrestling where a heel wrestler, and for people who don't know what that means, it means a bad guy, has actually turned heel. So he's become a bad guy while being a bad guy. Normally, you go from good guy, which is called a baby face or a face, to a bad guy. And Dominic has done a heel turn while being a heel. It's quite impressive stuff, really.
Yeah. No, the match itself was actually fairly good. Rhea pretended to kind of have her shoulder. Well, what's going on here?
Are you okay there?
Yeah, no, it just Microsoft wants to log in on my Edge browser because I had changed my password.
Mm.
And then, so the Edge browser came up and was like, "You want to log in?" I'm like, "No, I don't really want to." And then I shut it down. And it's like, "Are you sure you don't want to log in?"
I hate when Edge does that. It's like, use me.
Yeah, but no, like Rhea had pretended that her shoulder was hurting, and she had flexed it in a way where it literally looked dislocated again. So like, yeah, like it was a really decent match. And then they kind of like expanded on the Judgment Day stuff, kind of falling apart as well too, because like you had Damian Priest versus Gunter, and then
And what a match
Luther.
that was, to be fair. That was a very good match. I was
Oh,
impressed
Damien
with
was
it.
just mopping the floor with Gunter for like so much of it, and then
And he made his chest bleed as well.
yeah, pretty much. And then Finn Balor came out and cost Damien the match, and kind of um, kicked Damien and Rhea pretty much out of the Judgment Day, and
Yeah.
kind of took it over with Liv.
So my only issue with the whole Judgment Day thing isn't what they've done, and it isn't. And I'll speak in a minute. We'll actually cut to a bit of Monday Night Raw talk in a second.
Yeah.
So spoilers for that as well. But it's not what they've done, it's the fact that the way they've done it is very predictable. That's kind of my one issue with what's been happening with the Judgment Day, is it's just so predictable that I think it kind of lost a bit of his magic.
I was listening to the Power Bomb cast through Giant Bomb, and they were talking about like, is it predictable or is it where we knew the arc was going to go?
That's true, because those are different things.
Yeah, because like predictable is something that is sudden, that has no buildup, that we knew was coming.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
this has been building in the background for that
For a really long time, actually.
It's just a natural arc to where it was going. So it wasn't that it was predictable, it's that we were already along the ride for that to happen.
And actually, I think it's the right thing, because look, Damien and Rhea are the two in the Judgment Day that the fans secretly really loved.
Yeah.
They just had to boo them because they were the bad guys. And obviously cut to Monday Night Raw with them, and I'm sure we'll speak more about Monday Night Raw later. But on Raw, you have Damien come out and he's like, well, I have a whole new family now, and it's all the fans and everything. And he's after Finn Balor. Obviously, Balor says, well, no, but apparently JD wants to fight you tonight. But, I'm going to get you when you're least expecting it, kind of thing. And we get to that JD and Damian Priest match, and Priest is basically killing JD McDonough.
Everybody kills JD. JD's there to be killed.
Like, even Michael Cole at one point was like, how is JD McDonough still alive? Like, he actually said it on commentary. It was crazy. And then obviously, rather predictably, we have Balor come in and interfere in that match, causing a DQ. The Judgment Day, the members of the new Judgment Day, I guess we'll call them, which are obviously Balor, JD, Dominic, Carlito's now an official member. Apparently, he was actually at ringside during this match, but he kept running away from Damian Priest, which I found quite funny. And obviously Liv Morgan as well, and they're all beating up Priest. And then Rhea comes out. She manages to get her hands on Liv Morgan, but then Morgan gets away just as she's about to put her through the announcer's table.
Yeah.
And then JD's left in the ring by himself, and Rhea and Damien just kind of had their way with him, didn't they? They just, yeah.
Yeah, like, no, it was really good. I mean, like, even going into SummerSlam, when they had the press conference thing at the very beginning where they're on stage, it was like Damien and Rhea were like right there. So like, the Terra Twins are going to be a lock for like what they're doing.
And you can also tell that they are really good friends. And I think that will make for good performances, good storytelling. What I'm quite interested to see is if they get anyone else involved to help them, because at the moment they are still outnumbered.
Yeah.
So I am wondering if anyone else is going to be involved in that storyline. That's going to be quite interesting to see. But back to SummerSlam, because we did have some other very interesting matches. One of them, which I'd like to talk about, I don't know if you have there, is the CM Punk Drew McIntyre match with Seth Rollins as the referee, probably the best referee of all time.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, like, I kind of was expecting the CM Punk to kind of win his first match back in 10 years.
Yeah, I was.
But especially since, like, you know, Seth Rollins is like, he got injured on Raw. I can't remember the guy's name who did it. So like he's out for a little bit.
Bronson Reed flattened him.
Yeah. And apparently there was some type of like real injury during that or something. Mm-hmm. And Seth Rollins is out for a little bit. Because like originally at Mania it was supposed to be Seth Rollins and CM Punk.
But obviously so Punk got injured in the Rumble.
Yeah. And excuse me. And so like, yeah, there was, you know, like the I think the match was overall fine. Like they did the thing where like the necklace or the bracelet or wristlet, whatever, fell off, and then Seth Rollins grabbed it to kind of like just have it out of the way, and then CM Punk took it the wrong way, and then that led to Seth Rollins getting attacked by CM Punk, and CM Punk letting emotion run wild out there, and then
that caused him to lose, basically.
Yeah, but yeah, no, like CM Punk was kind of even fine with the loss because he just basically just wanted to like prove that he could still do it, and that you know that he still got his hands on Drew McIntyre and stuff like that. So I mean that'll continue to build.
I did like that bit on Raw where Drew came out, and even Drew was like, and this actually felt quite sincere, because I know that Drew McIntyre does have a real life problem with CM Punk, as does Seth Rollins. But it felt quite sincere when Drew said, like, no, you did prove to me that you do still have it. You can still do this. But obviously Drew left that other comment of, but you're not the best in the world anymore.
Yeah, like I think everybody kind of has a problem with CM Punk, because CM Punk had this kind of like ego that kind of like made him feel like he was bigger than the business. And like, I mean, there's tons of footage out there of CM Punk essentially not being terribly great to the industry. But I do have to say, since he's come back to WWE,
something's changed, right?
He has. I think he's figured it out to the point that if he fucks up here, he's done.
Yeah.
So
I also think that part of it is because people, and this is a small tangent here, but we don't often talk about wrestling, so please allow us this moment. I think people forget that I feel like the reason things fell apart in AEW for CM Punk was probably the fact that he wanted to be back in WWE, and he made that pretty clear, like way before he even left AEW. And I agree with you in some sense that he probably has figured out if he messes up here, it's over for him. But at the same time, I think some of it is also because the reason that people love Punk is that, yes, he is outspoken and he does say things he shouldn't say sometimes, but he also makes some really valid points. And there's a lot of, you know, I hate to bring up this person, but there is a clip where Punk says something about Vince McMahon back in the day, and you look at that clip now and you're like, oh, he clearly knew something, because, you know, why even say that if it was one of those weird ones? And it's like, so I think that because he's a very outspoken person, I think it creates problems. And I think that in his younger years, especially, the impression I get is, like you said, where I think he felt like he was better than the business because he didn't agree with the direction the business was going in, and with some of the decisions being made and stuff. And I saw recently in an interview he said that, you know, he probably never would have come back to WWE if Vince McMahon was still around. But actually, Vince not being around means that the WWE side of things is now run completely differently. Hell, we've got advertisements on the map now.
Yeah.
You know, in every corner now. It was just the Prime logo to start with, and at SummerSlam they're like, no, we're gonna chuck some more on there.
Yeah,
Minute,
I was kind of joking with
minute,
some friends. It's the ring has become a NASCAR car pretty much.
I mean, next minute, Michael Cole's gonna come out dressed up as a mascot or something. You know, it's like
Probably.
But yeah, I think that he seems to be in a much better place. There's obviously a lot of reports about CM Punk potentially actually gearing up at some point to take over kind of leadership of NXT, because he's been spending quite a lot of time with the younger talent there and learning how Shawn Michaels runs things over there. And it does sound like maybe there's been a conversation between him and the higher ups in WWE of when he hangs up his boots, maybe he's actually going to go into a management creative role. And that's something I can see him being very good at, because he's always been a very creative person. But I'm interested to see where they go with this storyline, because obviously, like you said, Seth Rollins is out for a while now, but those two are clearly going to have a match at some point. And then I don't know where this really leaves Drew McIntyre at the moment, unless CM Punk and Drew McIntyre are going to have another match. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. Is there anything else that we want to talk about from SummerSlam? Because I feel like there might be.
Yeah, we'll bleed through a few of them here. Like Nia Jax beat Bayley in a match that was just kind of boring. I don't know. I'm tired of big wrestlers sit on smaller wrestler as a finisher. I think it's stupid. That's just been kind of the thing that they've done with anybody that is like a bigger person. It's just boring. I mean, I don't find Nia Jax to be a good wrestler. I don't find her entertaining at all. But then I don't really find Bayley to be entertaining at all. Honestly, I think Bayley winning and then Tiffy calling in to take the belt would have been far more interesting.
I agree.
Then you have Braun Breaker versus Sami Zayn, and it made no sense that this match even exists because Sami has just done nothing but defend the belt against the same two people back to back.
Yeah.
So if they were going to have Braun Breaker come out and take the belt, which he did, he should have just did it the first time around. It made no sense for Sami to win it that time. Then you have LA Knight versus Logan Paul. And they obviously took the belt off Logan Paul just because like he can't do the Japanese tour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he also has only defended it twice in the last year and a half or whatever. And then like LA Knight. I mean, it was a good match. He did everything he needed to do, and the belt looks good on him. Yeah. So I mean,
and he was worthy of a belt. Like this guy should have had a belt last year. Let alone,
you know, like a lot of people kind of like go into like when I first saw LA Knight, I think it was at Mania. I was like, I don't really care for this guy, but through the months, I've actually quite liked him because like even though he is kind of like a combination of The Rock and Stone Cold, he pulls it off.
And he also does have his own element within that as well. He is a combination of those two. Even in his style of wrestling, he's a combination of those two.
Yeah.
But he adds something of his own to it. And I always think to myself, look, I haven't been a wrestler. I will never be a wrestler. But what I always think to myself through my couple of decades of watching wrestling now is that no act, well, very few acts, probably less than a handful in the last couple of decades, are completely original. They all take something from somewhere. unless you're the Undertaker or you were Bray Wyatt or something like that, you are taking something from somebody. Um, it's like people kind of put the Miz down a lot, but I saw recently that Cody Rhodes said that the Miz is actually one of the best to ever be in the business, one of the best to ever do it. And you can see that now because even in LA Knight, there's part of the Miz in LA Knight's character. Like he like so it's like you're always taking things from everywhere else because it's impossible to be completely original in an industry that's been around so long. It's the same as video games.
Yeah. The the only other match was the Cody Rhodes versus Solo Sikoa, the Bloodlines match. I don't like Solo. I don't think he has any mic skills. I don't think he has any wrestling talent. I find him incredibly boring. And all the commentators were like, he's the dangerous he's ever been. I'm like, no, he's 6 people who are far more dangerous on people.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
I'm personally much more a fan of Jacob Fatu, and he's only been around in WWE a little while, but it looks like he got hurt in the course of this match, so we'll talk about
he was hurt the prior match.
Okay.
And he was supposed to do more on this match as well too, which is why he got fed up with throwing the chair and stuff. It was I guess like a real tantrum.
Yeah.
He was supposed to get back in the ring at some point.
Wow.
And I mean, this match was only there to have Roman come back. Yeah. That's all it was. Because if you take a look at it, and including with what they're doing on Raw with the New Day, is they're set to have all of the factions explode for I want to say Bad Blood in October, but that's pretty far away.
Yeah, so but then it could be because they've got the Germany pay-per-view next, right?
Yeah.
And
so
then
maybe in October, because like you've got New Days essentially splitting up for Bad Blood.
Yeah,
you've got Judgment Day.
Because clearly Xavier Woods feels like Kofi is replacing Biggie, right? with Odyssey Jones coming in, so that's going to be interesting to see.
And
what
then you've
happens
got
there.
Judgment Day essentially fractured, so there's that. You've got the Bloodlines basically fractured, so there's that. Like I'm assuming it's going to be like Roman, Jimmy, Jay,
Sammy,
and Sammy essentially against the other 4.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and
like
then
I think you've got
I actually think the Bloodline thing will continue because they also in November will have Survivor Series, which traditionally has a 5-on-5 match. And I'm wondering, and this is just me pulling something out of my brain. I am wondering whether the ultimate part of this storyline is going to be The Rock gets involved and then Cody actually ends up helping the original Bloodline as well.
Yeah, so like the 5th members from those different things would be Cody and Rock. Rock being on Solo's solo.
That's what I'm kind of thinking, and then you can transition from that to either having Rock versus Cody 1-on-1, which The Rock clearly wants, or Rock versus Roman 1-on-1, which the people really want. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. But yeah, I do agree with you that it's quite funny that they've set up all of these groups to implode at the same time as they're leading up to Bad Blood, which is returning for the first time in like 20 years or something.
Yeah, and I think one of the solo matches at Bad Blood is going to be what's her name? EST versus Jade.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, okay. Bianca Belair versus Jade Cargill.
Bianca. Because they've been wanting to do that match for a while.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'd assume that's where we get the Damian Priest Finn Balor match as well. Because I feel like that doesn't need to go super long, right? So you can have the... Because they've already built towards that for so long.
I wonder if they would do a mixed tag.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Liv and
Maybe.
Rhea there as well, because you got to figure they're only going to have 5 to 6 matches, right?
Yeah, you would
Well,
assume
Bad
so.
Blood, they'll have 5 because
Oh
it's
yeah,
not a major pay-per-view.
yeah,
So they'll
they'll
have
have
5.
5. Yeah, yeah. That's true. That's a good point, actually. Yeah, it's going to be
Yeah.
interesting to see. But there you go. That was SummerSlam. Roman Reigns is back. I'm really interested to see where that storyline in particular
It's back
goes.
tonight.
As long as Paul Heyman comes out as well,
My name.
people will lose their minds when Paul Heyman comes
Heyman.
out. Trust me. But for now, in typical fashion of our podcast, we have some game reviews to go through, and not all of it's very good, is it, Jeff?
I mean, well, yeah, most of it is kind of like bad news. Oh my God. I am apologizing for all the people listening to this and being like, can't this guy just stop coughing?
It's one
I
of
would
those
love
weeks,
to.
people.
I would love to. All right. So, kind of like the main focus for today's episode is the Borderlands movie has started off with a Rotten Tomatoes score of about 0%. Now, it's probably changed in the last little while here. But Rotten Tomatoes gathers film critics' reviews of movies, determines whether they were mainly positive or negative, and assigns them a fresh or Rotten Tomatoes score accordingly. At the time of the writing, this was on VGC. This was, I don't have a date, yesterday.
As a quick
Yesterday.
update for you, it's now at 7% on Rotten
All right.
Tomatoes.
So, yeah, it was at 3% when Giant Bomb was talking about it, so it's at 7% right now. So this may change as more reviews are added, but the law of averages means signs currently point to a score that will end up being very low, even if it doesn't ultimately remain at 7%. So we have a bunch of reviews here. All right, so we have Vicky Jessup at the London Evening Standard gave the movie 1 star, writing, "Is Borderlands the worst film of the year? It's definitely in contention. So laughably bad, in fact, that it feels like it being catapulted back to a time when video game adaptations were a byword for mediocrity." The Hollywood Reporter's David Rooney concluded, "It's conceivable that longtime fans of the video game might get more out of Borderlands, but I wouldn't count on it. At one point, Claptrap returns to operational mode after a heavy weapons assault and says, 'I blacked out. Did I miss something important? Or did something important happen? Not in this movie.'" All right. Empire Magazine's Dan Jolin gave the movie 2 stars, saying, "Borderlands so wants to be Guardians of the Galaxy, but it doesn't come close." Peter DeBruch of Variety wrote, "When done right, such biting self-parody can serve to excuse tired storytelling. Alas, Borderlands arrives so close on the heels of Deadpool and Wolverine that it feels like a belly flop to that film's cannonball." Jonathan Sim at comingsoon.net gave the film a score of 3 out of 10, calling the film one of Eli Roth's weakest films, offering little excitement or laughs. Taylor Gates at Collider gave it a 5 out of 10. "It's just disappointing that the source material has so much more to offer in terms of its layered characters and complicated themes of trauma and survival that the film seems neither uninterested or incapable of tapping into." One last one here is Men's Journal critic Billy Melissa calls the film a lifeless cash grab that doesn't respect itself or the audience, adding, "If Borderlands doesn't stop studio executives from salivating at the sight of every single IP that comes across their desks, nothing will." I think I'm just trying to think here. Yeah, well, so we have a few more here. So film critic Edgar Ortega wrote, "Borderlands feels like what an out-of-touch executive think cool kids find appealing. There is not a single earnest character moment here, just obnoxious quips that feel dated as soon as they leave the actors' mouths. It's not even so bad it's good, it's just a complete mess." Bite-sized breakdown critic Adriano Caparuso said, "Borderlands is a disaster. Filled with every cliche you can ponder, this film swaps the mayhem and imagination of the games for a lifeless, unfunny, and visually repulsive dud with annoying characters and a cast with not 1 ounce of chemistry." His co-worker, Nick Van Dinther, added, "Borderlands is borderline unwatchable. The violence is bland and uninspired, the chemistry is non-existent, and the trajectory of the story is both boring and painfully obvious. I had no expectations for this, and yet I was still somehow let down." Now, obviously, there's hundreds more that I could read. But basically, like, this is a film that right from the very start looked like it was a slap in the face to a lot of the source material. You had the actress who was playing Tina like say that she found her inspiration for the character from Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn. Would you not find the inspiration for the character from Tina herself? You could literally have called up, the voice actress and been, hey, do you have any tips for me playing Tina?
Yeah.
Like, it makes absolutely no sense.
To me, it feels like one of those adaptations where what they've done is they've taken someone's looked at Borderlands and gone, "Oh, that's got some funny quips. That's all we need to do." That's basically
Well, they were
what it
trying to
comes
make their
across
Guardians
as.
of the Galaxy movie.
And don't get me wrong, that could have worked as like in some weird way that could have worked because that's kind of what Borderlands is, at least in a tonal sense. But there's so much more to Borderlands, and I think that that's what's disappointing people here. I do think it's important to point out that the audience scores, which actually seem reasonable on Rotten Tomatoes for most things, they're not crazy like Metacritic video game scores where people just review bomb things. They are at a 47%. So audiences do hold it in significantly higher regard than critics, but they still don't think it's great either.
Like this movie, it only exists because Randy Pitchford wanted to meet Kevin Hart.
Yeah.
That's basically it. Like, it's just it's so weird that you take a game that is so well known for its characters, and then you don't characterize those characters on screen to even be remotely close.
Yeah, it's very weird.
Kevin Hart's just playing Kevin Hart. He's not playing Roland.
And the weirdest part is you actually have a really good cast of actors here. And then you don't and then you don't get them to play the characters that you've brought them in to play. It's weird because these are really good actors in this movie. Like, this movie shouldn't be a failure. It should be a good movie. And that says to me that the script was probably the issue here.
Yeah, like, honestly, the only reason that I would go see it in the theater right now is because, like, Jessica Negri, who has had a huge history of cosplaying as, like, Moxie, she's in the film.
Yeah.
Like, she plays one of the barmaids at Moxie's bar. And, like, I've met Jessica Negri probably, like, 20 times. And she's such an absolutely fantastic person. Like, when I don't see her for a year and I come up to her table at a con and she's like, Jeff, like, that is awesome. I've actually
remembers you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I've loved watching kind of like what she's kind of done, especially with the Moxie character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like the fact that she's in the film, that's awesome. Like, that I think is absolutely cool that they're like, hey, let's bring people into this film that are known for their love of Borderlands.
Yes. Yeah.
And give them something to do. And that's absolutely awesome. And that's honestly the only reason that I would go see the film right now. But at the exact same time, I don't want to support a bad video game adaptation because it just sends executives the wrong message.
Yeah. I mean, I will still watch this movie at some point.
Yeah.
Just to see and make my own assumptions, because the problem is right now I haven't seen it, so I'm basing it on what other people are saying and what I've seen in trailers. But the impression I very much get is that they essentially tried to make a movie that was a comedy using a well-known IP that has more than comedy about it. It's almost like what happened with the Halo TV show, where someone picked it up and went, "Oh, Halo, we know what people like about that," and they got it completely wrong. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
It's basically just another adaptation that doesn't respect the source material and tries to pigeonhole it into a mold that it just doesn't need.
Yeah, I agree. So hopefully, but I do think there was a strong point made by one of those reviewers as well when we were reading their responses. That I think this also proves that not every video game IP or not every IP in existence needs a movie adaptations. Like at the end of the day, some video games are not going to suit a movie or TV adaptation very well. And I actually think that Borderlands is probably one of those. It's the same as like if you tried to do a Destiny movie, for example. I actually don't think a Destiny movie would work very well either.
No, because like, where do you even pull from the storyline?
Precisely.
I mean, you got
And
2 hours. Like,
yeah. So I just think that at the end of the day, certain video games do and certain video games don't. It's the reason that Assassin's Creed movie struggled as well, because they tried to do their own sort of storytelling within the
well,
world.
yeah, like they relied too much on the future stuff, which to me is the most boring parts.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah,
know, of that kind of stuff. And there was barely like the stuff that was in like the period piece stuff was actually
yeah,
pretty good.
it was. Yeah, I agree. So
But
it's going to be interesting to see, because I actually don't know which video game adaptation is up next, but I do know that recently we got our first look at the second season of The Last of Us, and I know that lots of people are looking forward towards that, which is obviously coming next year. I
I'm
personally
so like I
go
am
on.
so excited to hear what people think about season 2
Oh,
who
I
have not
know.
played the games.
That's
I
gonna
am
be
so
interesting.
I am so excited for like, oh my god, I love this show. Like I love Pedro Pascal, blah blah, everything's so
Bye.
amazing. And then watch season 2 come in basically and people are like, I fucking hate that show.
Yeah, that's gonna be interesting. That's gonna be interesting. Uh, it's almost gonna be like when Deadpool thought that Captain America was in his movie.
Yeah. Avengers Flame On. Yeah, so funny. Oh my god. All right. So we got a trio of news stories that are all connected here. So Warner Brothers is looking at licensing its IP to other studios. So Warner Brothers Discovery, David Zaslav, has said that he's looking into licensing the company's IP to non-Warner Brothers studios to produce games. So we'll break these off here in chunks. So this is essentially what Disney is doing right now. They basically have meetings with studios that are not tied directly to Disney Interactive or anything like that. And they're like, hey, do you want to make, we have an idea for a game. And so they basically have meetings, they talk about it, they do all that kind of stuff, which is why you're seeing a Black Panther and Iron Man game coming from EA. And then you've got a Captain America and Captain America and Black Panther game that is being made by Skydance Games. Like, you've got all these things, and I think that is the strongest thing that they can do, because it allows games like a Superman game to finally happen. It
And
allows
can I also point out, is this not something I said to you the last time we recorded when we were talking about WB?
pretty much like that. Like, that's what they need to do. The only thing that I don't want them to do is to lock down a character to a studio for like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah,
So
they
like,
shouldn't
yeah,
do the thing that happened with Star Wars, right? Where Star Wars had that EA deal for like 10
exactly.
years.
That is the worst thing that they could possibly do. Now,
Yeah.
here's the reason why I think that's going to happen, is because David Zaslav is going to be like, oh, you're going to pay us
A
like
lot of money.
$150 million for the Batman IP for the next 10 years. Oh, we can use that money right now. So
Yeah.
it's hard to say exactly like if that if that's going to stick. But there's some weird comments that he kind of makes in regards to this exact thing. And it, again, this quote doesn't really suit it. One of the reasons that Hogwarts Legacy was so successful and the #1 game last year was that you went to Hogwarts Legacy and you entered the game and you were able to be part of that world. what does that have to do with licensing out the company IP?
Yeah, I agree.
It doesn't. It just means having a good IP and matching it with a good person. So that's the closest thing that I can see that.
Yeah.
That ultimately, I think, is a big piece of where the industry is going. That will create a movie, whether it's Batman, Superman, or Harry Potter, and maybe there'll be a TV show.
Yeah.
But the ability to go in the world and have the experience of spending time with all the characters is something that we still own. We have 11 studios here, and we have a lot of IP. And there's also been a lot of interest among others in coming in and taking advantage of some of that IP for gaming, which we're looking at.
Yeah. I think the way it's coming across to me is almost like what he's saying is we have 11 studios, but we actually have more IP than we can utilize ourselves.
Yeah.
So it makes sense for us to allow some of this IP to be
that
used
makes
by
sense.
other people.
The first 2 paragraphs didn't need to happen.
Yeah, I agree.
Because like he's just like, oh, we have these properties and you can play around the world and blah 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 blah. I don't know. He's just one of those executives that is just saying stuff for
all
PR
he sees and speaks and hears is money, Jeff. That's what it
pretty
is.
much. Speaking of money coming to Warner Brothers is reportedly considering selling a stake in its video game business. That's according to Financial Times sources who claim that the media giant is looking to offload smaller assets in an attempt to help reverse a nearly 70% decline in its stock price since Warner Media and Discovery merged in 2022. It's said to be considering offers to sell Polish broadcaster TVN or a stake in its video game arm, which is home to a dozen studios. Last month, Warner announced that it had acquired Player First Games, the studio behind the free-to-play fighter Multiverses, for an undisclosed sum. Warner Brothers Discovery executive J.B. Perrett said earlier this year that the company's gaming business revolves around 4 main intellectual properties, which are all billion-dollar-plus businesses themselves. They are Mortal Kombat, Game of Thrones, DC, and Harry Potter. So Harry Potter went on to be 2023's best-selling game, but they also took a $200 million loss on Suicide Squad Killed the Justice League, or as it's going to be known as Suicide Squad Saved the Justice League, because, well, they were clones all along.
Or as it's really known, Suicide Squad Kill WB Games.
Pretty much. Like, you know, if they were to sell, like, I don't know, if they were to sell, say, NetherRealm, you'd have to still have them work on Mortal Kombat, right?
Yeah, they'd have to sell it with the IP. That's the only way they could ever sell NetherRealm. The only studio I actually think they could sell without an IP is the studio that did the Mordor games, who are working on Wonder Woman.
Yeah, probably.
I think they're the one studio where you could go, oh, they could actually make something completely original. That's probably quite interesting. The other studios are too interconnected with the IPs, but maybe. So I've heard a few things on this story, and look, I don't know anything for sure. I want to say that, but there has been reports going around that Tencent and Microsoft have already made bids and that kind of thing. The thing that I heard is that WB are definitely looking at selling the gaming studios and the gaming arm there, but there have been no official bids yet by anybody. That's what I was told. And then I got into a conversation with someone last night, and because they were saying, "Oh, I don't want Microsoft to buy it," and blah blah blah. And the way I look at it is like, I know it sounds really bad and negative, but if the choice, realistically, if these studios are for sale, there's only really 4 choices I can see, and that is Microsoft, Tencent, Amazon, or Meta. And I certainly don't want Amazon or Meta buying them.
I don't think Meta was, because they just shut down
Reddit. Right.
We'll get to that in the next story.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, like I don't know if, like, I think most of their stuff would probably sell piecemeal.
Yeah, I
like
agree.
I could see, like, EA jumping in for like Mortal Kombat and NetherRealms, because I don't think they have like a flagship fighting game.
I mean, that one would be a hell of a one for Microsoft, though, wouldn't it? If they could get that individually, that would be the one they need to go after.
But the thing about it is like they already have Killer Instinct, and that's
They
got a
do,
huge
and
following.
but
They
they're
just
doing
need to follow
nothing
up
with
on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And I mean, God, it'd be great if they had the developer free to work on it.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, they
I
do.
agree. But yeah, what I was trying to get to is that I actually think that of the most realistic options to, if you're talking about buying the whole thing, at least, I think those are the 4 options. And look, I don't really want Tencent to get anybody else because they already have a lot more people than anyone thinks.
Amazon, I think, would be a good bet, just for the simple fact that they could make Mortal Kombat like movies and TV series that
So
help
Amazon would make a lot of sense to me. And like I said, Microsoft would make sense to me because we know that they did make a proper bid previously.
Yeah, I don't want them buying anything more. Not with all the layoffs that they've had.
I don't either. But what I would say is the way that I looked at it was, if it comes down to Microsoft or those studios being shut down, I would rather that Microsoft bought them. Do you see what I mean? Like,
I mean, yeah, worst case scenario is always going to be, the best case scenario in some capacity.
Yeah.
But yeah. The last little bit of Warner news is Warner sees a 41% year-on drop in Q2, which was due to Suicide Squad sales. So we touched on that before here. So game revenue declined 41%, primarily driven by the weak performance of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League this year compared to the strong performance of Hogwarts Legacy in the prior year. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League was the company's biggest recent video game release, developed by Arkham series creators Rocksteady. The game was met with mixed reviews and failed to achieve a constant player base. So yeah, like this was again like, a game that didn't really hit at all. Like it's tried to keep it alive with some extra content, like having the Joker and Mrs. Freeze and all that kind of stuff, and they're still going to play out through the rest of the season. They've got that content kind of still going. And now the game has turned into a Suicide Squad Save the Justice League, because again, like everyone had already suspected that the Justice League that we were killing were clones.
Yeah.
Meaning that there's only one member of the Justice League that actually died during that game, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But it'll be a very interesting final season when that comes around, where they actually have the Justice League. I almost wonder if the final season will be allowing you to actually play as the Justice League to take down Brainiac. So you would add Batman and Superman.
That
and
would be really
and
interesting. That would be really interesting.
But I don't know. I think it's too little, too late for that game.
I
think,
agree.
honestly,
I agree.
Whatever they release is just going to be met with like.
And I think that this is one of the problems with these live service kind of games, is for the most part, unless they have a massive overhaul, their first impression is what they live or die by, right? And it's kind of like Halo. We saw it with Halo Infinite, where once it ran out of content because it wasn't getting content quick enough, it died. Even though you could go back to it now and it actually has way more content, it has a lot more to do and all that sort of stuff, the game still has a decent sized audience, but it's nowhere as big as it should have been because it died based on its first impression, essentially. And I think that the same thing with Suicide Squad, like they could do some amazing stuff in the seasons but like you said, it's just too little too late. And I also think that part of it in that game's case is probably just that from what I can tell, based on what I've seen and what you've told me, the core game just isn't that good. And I think that's the problem, right? Is
No.
when the core game isn't that good, it doesn't matter what additional content you have. You could have the best additional content in the world, but the core game is not enticing people to play.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
All right. As we mentioned, Meta is shutting down Ready at Dawn Studios. Speaking to Android Central, a Meta spokesperson told the publication that the cuts were made to ensure that the Reality Labs project stays within budget and that Oculus Studios can make a better long-term impact in VR development. While it had already shifted its focus to VR development several years before being acquired by Meta, Ready at Dawn cut its teeth developing for PlayStation platforms. Its credits include PSP games Daxter, God of War Chains of Olympus, and God of War Ghost of Sparta, while its last PlayStation exclusive was 2015's PS4 title The Order 1886. Since then, it has developed well-received VR games, including Lone Echo and Lone Echo 2. Meta said that the Ready at Dawn employees were being encouraged to apply elsewhere within Oculus Studios, and that it wants to hold on to as many developers as possible. This is such a... Ready at Dawn, it doesn't have a massive history of being a very, very well-regarded studio. It's made fun games, but The Order 1886 was always a talking point just for its visuals.
Yes.
It's, it sucks to see this kind of studio even being let go from PlayStation in the begin with, because it had such a strong tie to a lot of its properties with Daxter and God of War.
I agree.
But especially because they, if they were jumping into VR and stuff, like a VR God of War game could have worked well for them because they've obviously got the chops to pull it off.
Yeah.
But this is just Meta going oh, we're cutting these guys to stay within budget and stuff like that. But the problem is if you have them make a game, you have extra income coming in. So it's just incredibly, it just sucks to see because they're such a talented studio.
It does, and we often say that we're always talking about closures and layoffs and things on this podcast, and unfortunately I think that's just where we've got to in the business now, where the games industry it's always been a business, but it's become a level of business now where so much money is at stake that these people don't think long term anymore because they're not willing to take a risk. They just want to make or save as much money as possible. And that sucks, and I can't remember if we've got it on the doc here because I don't have it up right now, but it's like what's going on with Bungie recently, and I look at that and I think to myself, honestly, I give it a year and I have a feeling that Bungie might be shut down. I don't know why. I just have a horrible feeling about that.
Yeah, it's stupid with the Bungie thing because originally it was just Sony who brought them in, not PlayStation, and they were going to have complete autonomy to kind of do what they wanted. But now that's just been completely revoked. I mean, the CEO essentially is too busy buying cars right now to worry about his company.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely sucked. And I mean, translating into our next story as well too is Game Informer was shut down by GameStop.
Yeah.
And that has a multi-decade history. I think it was 30 years or whatever. But right now there's several groups are in the process of attempting to preserve the history of Game Informer following its closure. So on Friday, it was announced that the magazine, which began in 1991 and at one point was the third most circulated publication in the United States, would close, leaving over a dozen staffers out of work and years of written and video content in peril. The publication's website currently redirects to a single landing page with decades of content now inaccessible and no word from parent company of whether or not the website will ever return. Game Informer's Twitter account has also been deleted, and after a former staffer who seemingly still had access to the account used it to write what they called a genuine goodbye to the publication. This is in contrast to apparently ChatGPT being used to write the final level goodbye message that felt very AI written, and even Jason Schreier wrote a similar one in AI, and it was basically the same thing. Several groups have now started efforts to preserve the publication's history. One of the main groups leading the charge is MinMax, which former Game Informer video producer Ben Hansen founded. After the announcement of Game Informer's closure, the MinMax Discord group quickly became a de facto preservation effort, with fans sharing scans of issues and copies of online content that never made it to print. Speaking to GameFile, Hansen said he shot a documentary about the publication in 2019 and hopes to release it soon. This week, MinMax released a video filmed earlier this year in which Hansen, alongside fellow former Game Informer editor Dan Reichert, Leo Vader, and Alex Van Aken, toured the publication's final office space. Also speaking to GameFile, a former staffer said the website's closure is a tremendous hit to important preservation work, and I hope GameStop reconsiders its decision. The sudden shutdown of the website and magazine last week eliminated a rich archive of video game history, including thousands of news stories, game reviews, interviews, original reporting, and exclusive cover stories that documented the making of countless games, including high-profile cancellations like StarCraft Ghost and Rainbow Six Patriots. They also had a current deal going with EA in regards to covering Dragon Age, the Veilguard. So like that is pretty much up in the air. It sucks.
This one sucks. And also the other part of it that sucks is like, fair enough. Okay. If I'm like, make the decision to close down the publication and kind of get rid of everybody, whatever. But you could, because we know how websites work. You pay for them on a yearly basis. You're probably not renewing that website anytime soon because you've actually, in your case, probably paid for like 10 years. You could have left the website up. You could have left the YouTube channel up, even if you weren't ever going to do anything with it again. Like, it's one of those really weird ones where it's almost like they just want to eliminate any trace of it, and I don't understand why. Because this is one of the biggest publications in games media. Like we were saying, it has such a rich history. It has so many exclusive stories that, you know, no other website had that are now going to be lost. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, this stuff is important not only for them, but for the actual kind of industry of games, because it's important to look back on this history of stuff and be able to say, you know, what happened with this game? Oh, it was cancelled because of X, Y, and Z. Like, all this kind of reporting is really, really important, and it's the kind of thing that people will keep looking at years and years later. So why get rid of it? At least give people some way to be like, or some notice of like, oh, we're going to shut down the website next week. And then at least it gives people a week to, you know, back everything up and try and keep some of the stuff they want to keep. It just seems really, really weird. And I think
especially
sucks.
the Dragon Age coverage, because like they obviously like were paid or whatever like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, how does that deal work?
Yeah, I agree. So you know, this sucks, and a lot of people have lost their jobs, and that really, really sucks as well. And I just don't get it. I know that Game Informer obviously has had some problems over the last few years, because I know a few years ago they cut quite a few staff to cut back on costs and that kind of thing. But it's just like, okay, but you know, I'm surprised that nobody came in to try and sort of be like, well, we'll take the publication then. Do you know what I mean? Because that's
because the magazine sold well.
Yeah, and even without the magazine, when you think of gaming websites and outlets, that was one of the main ones. You know, you had your IGN, you had your GameSpot, and then it was kind of like Game Informer was the next rundown after that, you know? So it is a real shame, and it was news that I think hit all game fans hard, and kind of everyone, just because, like I said, people have lost their jobs, they've lost access to work that they worked really, really hard on. Um, other gamers have lost access to content that they really enjoyed, and especially the content on the YouTube channel. There's literally zero reason to close that down. You could have kept that running forever.
Yeah.
Like there's no reason whatsoever to close that channel down. So I don't get this personally. I don't really know what's going on, and it feels like I said, it feels like they're just trying to destroy any history of Game Informer ever even existing. It's very weird. Very
Yeah,
weird.
it just doesn't make any sense for a lot of it. And like I mentioned this on Keith's podcast, but even if these guys, even if some of them were to go and start their own little like startup or whatever, there's almost so much money from a lot of people that are probably already double dipping on things like Second Wind and like other like these like fan paid for kind of like platforms. There's only so much like financial bandwidth that can kind of go to support those people.
Yeah, there can only be so many completely independent outlets, right?
Yeah.
And it's like I think that because at one point I did consider potentially us starting a small Patreon to finance being able to put out an audio version of this podcast, because depending on how we do that and where we do it, there can be some costs involved. And then actually I thought to myself, do you know what? The thing is, there's only so much money people can spend. And so if we can give content to people for free while we're able to, we will do that. And I know, but for these people, they can't do that because it's their livelihoods. Like,
Yeah.
this was their job, and I really hope that they can find new jobs, or if they do try and start their own thing, that it's successful, or maybe they go some sort of other route and try and start an official website with some sort of backer that isn't like a crowd-funded thing. Some of these places might start like an official business, because there are investors out there, and there are people. As much as we say that games media is dying, there are people that really want to be in on it still, and are willing to put money into it. So that's why I'm so surprised that why did nobody pick up this publication? Was there even the option to do so? Like, was that something
Probably
they
not.
even what? Like, but even then, it makes you think of, why would they not do that? Why would they not float this out into the ether of like, we're gonna get rid of this unless
They
we
probably
can
didn't want it
sell it?
leaking.
Yeah, it
Hard to say.
really, really, really sucks. So I'm sorry to everyone who lost their jobs in this, and I'm sorry to everyone that lost access to content that they've loved over the years, because there's certainly been a lot of it from Game Informer.
Yeah. All right. Couple news stories here. Epic has announced a significant change to Fortnite Battle Pass item exclusivity. In a blog published on Wednesday, it said that any type of item included in future Fortnite Battle Passes might be offered for sale in the Fortnite shop 18 or more months after the Battle Pass in question has expired. These include outfits, back blings, pickaxes, emotes, instruments, decals, wraps, loading screens, banners, icons, and more. In an FAQ, it said not all items are guaranteed to come to the shop after 18 months. Shop selection is dependent on a variety of factors, but there is no guarantee that a Battle Pass item will come to the shop after this change goes into effect. If an item in a future Battle Pass will never be available outside the pass, we will let you know. Epic added, one reason for this change is that we want players down the road to enjoy Battle Pass content, such as outfits based on popular licensed characters. So previously, if a character was part of the Battle Pass, you couldn't get them later on down the road. They were licensed just for that battle pass. So what this means now is that Epic is licensing them for a longer term, pretty much. So characters that are part of the battle passes will be able to be bought flat out, because again, it's a good source of revenue to have those characters available outside of the battle pass later on. But it also doesn't disrupt the battle pass by having them simultaneously part of the battle pass. So it'll be a year and a half that you'll see them happen. Year and a half is a very long time. I kind of wish it was just a year, but 18 months is essentially what they've got going for it.
Yeah. Can I just cut you off here?
Sure.
Because I've just seen something and it blows my mind because it kind of links to the Borderlands news from earlier.
Sure.
But obviously, there is another video game adaptation coming up, which is Like a Dragon, which is going to be on Amazon, right?
Yeah.
That announcement came out of nowhere, and I've just seen on Games Radar there was a bit of an article on it yesterday, and the headline reads like this. Okay, Amazon's Like a Dragon Yakuza TV show cast reveal they've never played the games. Quote, "We wanted to do our own version." That worries me a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's hard to say exactly. It depends if like the showrunner itself, because like you take a look at like Walter Goggins, like his portrayal of like the ghoul was very good, but he, as far as I know, I think he said he never even experienced the games at
So
all.
you don't have to have experienced them. Yeah.
So like it really depends. Like if the showrunner themselves are like not connected and know the property at all, I'd be a little bit more concerned. But I think RGG is also helping with this.
I think they are, yeah, and that's the thing. I think it goes back to, and I think you've nailed it exactly there. Of if you can get a showrunner or producer on a movie or whatever who knows the IP well enough to make sure you're hitting the right tonal things and the right storytelling aspects, the actors playing the characters can figure that out as long as the script is good, right? And that's what we saw with Fallout, which has recently been nominated for tons of awards.
Yeah.
But it's going to be interesting to see.
I don't know, like if they're going to lean into like the comedic elements.
I agree.
Of Yakuza. Like I could see them just making it just a very serious kind of show and not really having that stuff there. But
in a way, though, I think with a Yakuza TV show, you might be able to get away with that because the truth is the core main story of every Yakuza game has actually been very serious.
Yeah,
most of the comedic stuff comes from the side.
I just think that like people who are not aware of Yakuza may watch like a scene where he's beat some guy to like an absolute pulp, and then 5 minutes later he's like, you know, trying to find like underpants for a guy from a vending machine or something, you know, like it doesn't make much sense for people that are not aware of that.
That's true. Of things. Yeah. So that kind of, I don't know what the word is for it, but that tonal disconnection between the two polar opposites there, I can imagine not being very good in a TV show. So I think you're probably right in the sense of I can imagine them focusing much more on the serious side of the game, and in terms of adapting that, and maybe we'll get a few. Well, I hope that we'll get a few nods to like, oh, here's a funny moment for you, or
there might be some little things and stuff. Like I think you'll have the sub stories, but I think they'll just essentially be kind of like, you know, somebody got mugged and he has to go and get like a purse or you know, or like, you know, those types of like sub stories, things that kind of fit like the tone of what they're kind of shooting for.
It's going to be interesting to see, and that's coming soon, I believe, in November. I would have to double check that, but I believe it's coming in November.
All right. All right. Two news stories here, although technically just kind of one. Arcane founder says Prey and Dishonored fans will be happy with his new game. So Arcane founder Rafael Colliantonio thinks fans of Dishonored and Prey will be pleased with the next game from his current studio. Following 18 years at Arcane, which he served as president and co-creative director, Colliantonio announced in 2019 that he had formed a new outlet called Wolfeye Studios. Their first game, Weird West, was actually pretty good. Came out 2 years ago. And he's been kind of teasing his new game as a first-person retro sci-fi RPG. He said that players will learn about the title pretty soon. So more than likely, he's probably going to be showing stuff off at Gamescom.
Yeah.
Because he's saying imminently. We will reveal more about our game in a few days. Fans of previous first-person games that I was involved with, such as Dishonored and Prey, will be happy, as he wrote on Twitter. So this should be interesting because this is kind of like, somebody who has a history in the games of Arcane, in which Microsoft pretty much just shut down the Arcane that worked on Prey and the first Dishonored. So this will be kind of more from them, and I'm like, I would love to have known if he brought some of those ex-Arcane people in.
I do know that some of those Arcane people actually moved over and joined the Leon team as well.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see if some of them did move over with him, because you would imagine, being at Arcane for so long, he probably knows a lot of those people, probably has very good relationships with many of them as well. So yeah, it will be interesting to see what they do, because the way that was described as a first-person kind of sci-fi, but with a classic kind of thing, like I'm very, very interested, because I didn't actually play their last game, but this one sounds interesting. So hopefully we do learn more about it very, very soon, and we will of course cover that on the podcast here.
All right. Last studio, basically, and that is WWE has poked fun at the fan reception to the recently released Pat McAfee WWE 2K24 DLC pack. The pack adds WWE commentator and former NFL player Pat McAfee as a playable superstar in the game. He's joined by 4 other playable characters, AJ Hawk, Darius Butler, Ty Schmidt, and Boston Connor, all of whom are his co-hosts on the Pat McAfee Show, a daily sports show hosted on ESPN. The pack has been received poorly by fans, who have responded in anger at several slots of DLC characters being wasted on non-WWE personalities. Yeah. During WWE's latest premium event, SummerSlam, an advertisement for the DLC was played between matches. Following this, longtime WWE commentator Michael Cole joked to McAfee, "Hey, at least the fans seem to like it," before laughing with fellow commentator Corey Graves, acknowledging the backlash. "Yeah, I'd say that is not the case at all," McAfee replied. McAfee also referenced the backlash on social media, joking that everybody is pumped about it. People are really excited. When I saw the trailer for this, Sugar, you got very, very close to shutting down my browser. All right.
Don't do that, Sugar.
That would have just ended the podcast. All right. You got to make sure that you don't shut it down. Okay. When I saw the trailer for that pack and seeing all like his announcer guys, I was like, does WWE owe Pat McAfee like a life debt or something like that?
I mean,
like, did he save Triple H's life and we just don't know about it?
Do you know what the funny thing is? I can understand Pat McAfee himself being in it.
Yes.
Because he's on programming. He has actually had matches in the past, more than one. That makes sense. His friends don't need to be in the game.
No. Like what next? Are we going to get like Logan Paul's friends, basically, like dressing up in like the Prime
that
bottle?
Would make more sense. At least they've actually been involved. Like
are we going to get like Sami Zayn's wife, and like are we going to get like
everyone
Rhodes'
who's in
dog?
The front row, right? Yeah.
Like, are we going to get all of these people, basically, like the husbands and wives? The husbands and wives pack.
Guy.
There, it names itself. Like, it's so stupid. Like, I honestly want to know, like,
why that
how many people have
made.
actually bought this pack.
Mm-hmm.
because it's got to be in the
I mean,
tens.
I only have it because it came with the season pass. I wouldn't
Yeah,
have bought it
but I
separately.
mean, out of the season pass, I would love to know like
How many
what
people bought
9
it?
people
Yeah,
were thinking.
Pat McAfee and his friends, they're the ones who bought it.
Yeah, pretty much. Like it makes no sense. Like at all. Like if you're gonna add DLC of 4 or 5 people, add the Wyatt 6.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And do you know what the funny thing is? I actually would have rather they did something like a commentator's pack, because you could have had Pat McAfee, you could have had Corey Graves, who used to be a
Samantha
wrestler.
Irvin.
Like you could have done some interesting things, like Wade Barrett, used to be a wrestler. I know he's in the game anyway, but the point is, you could have made him part of a commentator's pack, and that would have made a lot more sense, because at least the commentators, several of them used to be wrestlers,
Yeah,
and the
JR.
ones that didn't, at least they're involved in the. At
See,
least they're actually involved.
the worst thing about this entire DLC pack isn't
Mhm.
the fact that they have these characters. It's that Samantha Irvin has to do announcements for them for when you wrestle on the Raw stage.
Yeah, I know.
That is a
I know.
waste of her talents.
Yeah.
Like it's ridiculous. But yeah, that generally covers the kind of news for pretty much everything this week. There's been a couple things, basically quick little things like the Astrobot limited edition DualSense controller is available for pre-order, selling out pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
And Control 2 is now in a playable state. So Remedy is kind of working on that. The Max Payne 1 and 2 remakes are in full production, but Control 2 is in a playable state. So they're able to kind of maneuver around.
If Control 2 is in a playable state, that means that it's probably out next year.
Maybe. It's hard to say. Like the first
Remedy,
one, like I barely had the map work. So
Remedy, generally speaking, work quite quickly.
Yeah.
But also, when you hear a developer talk about a playable state, that usually means that they can play the game in some sense, start to finish, even if not every environment is finished and things like that. That would suggest to me that at the very most, this game's probably 2 years away.
Yeah. But
so we'll see. Yeah. We'll see. I'm excited for it. I really liked Alan Wake 2. Jeff obviously did not. Jeff also had problems with the first Control, where it just didn't want him to play the game.
The map never worked for me. Like when you look at that map when you're not in an area and all the areas are blacked out, that was my entire experience. So it's kind of like, you need to get to the refinery or whatever. And I'm like looking for pictures of the refinery on environmental storytelling.
That game did have good environmental storytelling, so at least you could still find your way around.
Kind of. Yeah, I don't know. Again, I'm not a huge Remedy fan. They've never made a game for me that has just kind of blown my mind or anything like that.
Not even Max Payne?
Not really. No, I don't know. I'm not a fan.
I guess that I'll be reviewing Max Payne 1 and 2 for us.
I'm not a fan of the noir detective kind of things and stuff like that. And honestly, if I had to put a catalyst of why, I think it's the show Dexter.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because every single episode is like, did I fuck up?
Yeah.
Are they going to get me?
Yeah, I never liked that show.
That's every fucking episode. And so the narrating kind of stuff just drove me absolutely up the wall. So
well, we do have a bit more time here to obviously end on what we've been playing, as we always do. I'll go first because mine is actually quite quick. Because there's actually at the moment, unfortunately, I'm playing a lot of things that I can't talk about, other than saying the things I'm playing are alpha and beta builds of games that will be coming soon in the future. Other than that, I finished the Elden Ring base game, beat the Elden Beast. We're on to the DLC now. I have taken a few days break from it because Elden Ring can really grind your gears at some point. So I've taken a few days away from it, but I am onto the DLC now. Keith has still been helping me through it when I need him. We beat the dancing lion guy. That was annoying.
Did you get your mimic tier finally?
I have got my mimics here, yes, and
Make
he is
sure you put a
he's
raw
very
dumpling in your
helpful.
last. Make sure you put a raw dumpling in your last inventory slot.
Why? What does that do?
It so the last item you put in your consumables.
Okay.
So if you have 8 consumable slots or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So if you have 3, in the 4th one, put a raw dumpling.
Oh wow. Okay.
Because you don't want to use it because it will give you a little bit of health, but it'll also poison you.
Yes.
But your mimic tier cannot be poisoned, so it takes the health, but it doesn't use the item. So if you have 2 of them, he could use it 7 million times and it's never consumed. So the mimic tier will constantly use it to heal.
Oh, interesting.
I've had them almost be dead in a boss fight and then take the aggro away, and they'll just constantly use that and get back to full health.
Wow. Okay, I didn't know that was a thing. Thank you for the tip there, Jeff. But yeah, unfortunately, other than that, I can't speak about what I've been playing at the moment. I was hoping, well, I was originally meant to maybe get a game for review, and that didn't happen in the end. So that was unfortunate. But yeah, Jeff, I know you have probably been playing quite a lot of things. So what have you been playing?
Yeah, so I'll kind of like start in order. I played and reviewed Cat Quest 3. This is obviously a straight to sequel from Cat Quest 2. This one's pirate themed, so you can kind of navigate a pirate boat and kind of do that stuff. This is nothing more than what Cat Quest 2 offered. If you were looking for any type of advancement in it or change in gameplay or anything like that, like something that is deserving of a sequel, like noticeable changes, none of that exists here. Probably about the most negative thing that I kind of say about it is that it feels like a lesser game than 2, because while you have the boat and you can kind of go around, there's almost too much water. Like the land masses are very small. Like there's only one massive like land mass, and even then that one is kind of small as well. So a lot of the times you're playing
So
is
it's
in towers
basically
and caves.
Assassin's Creed Black Flag, but with cats. There's too much water.
There's just like there's not enough land to kind of go on and do battles with and stuff, because the majority of the times you're in caverns and towers and caves and all that kind of stuff. Doing the fights and stuff, and the fights and the combats and all the stuff has been refined. Like it plays better than it ever has. I just wish there were more areas of land that you could actually have those fights on, because a lot of the times you're fighting in essentially rinse and repeat recycled locations and stuff, and the pirate boat stuff is not strong enough to kind of support a lot of it. Like I love the fact that you have like your armor and your weapons and you customize your stuff and your cats. You can dress them up in all sorts of like different outfits and stuff like that, but you can't decorate the boat. Like there's no sails, there's no changing the hull. Like it feels like a missed opportunity to kind of like fire like yarn balls or something like that. Like it doesn't use the pirate stuff as good as it should, but everything else is great. Like I think visually it's the best it's ever looked. I think the gameplay in terms of the combat stuff is the best it's ever done.
I was going to say that. So I haven't played any of the Cat Quest games, but this one looked so good that alone kind of made me want to play it.
Yeah, like it's super fun. Like it only has local co-op, so it doesn't have like online co-op. So like for example, if we were to play co-op on it, you'd have to get it on Steam or whatever. Or do you need to own a copy for Parsec?
I'm not sure actually. That's
because Parsec allows you to kind of fake local play, but I'm not too sure if the joiner needs to actually
I'm not
own
sure.
it. Because like the co-op for those games have always been fun. Like Cat Quest 2, it was dogs and cats. So like you always had an AI companion dog with you that you could swap back and forth. This one here, it's just you all the time.
Okay.
But it still has co-op, and like they're super fun games. But I will say like Cat Quest 2 is just far better. It's got like more interesting characters. I think the story is more interesting. But no, like again, like if you like Cat Quest 1 and 2, you will love Cat Quest 3. It's the same game. It's just a new place to explore, and they do make connections to the first and second games. There's like an NPC that you can interact with, essentially, that kind of like starts hinting at where the fourth game's going to go, even so much as naming it. But no, it's still good. Like it's still a very, very good game. It's not any different than what we've played before.
That's a
in
shame.
that regard.
That's a shame. Because in a sequel, I think, like you said, in a sequel, you're always looking for something that changes the game in some way. And when that isn't there, there's inevitably going to be some disappointment. But I know you've played other things, so why don't you talk to me about something that you were really happy to play?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll skip talking about Star Wars Bounty Hunter then. We'll come back to that one. Oh boy. Creatures of Ava. This is an interesting game. Like my headline is Beyond Good and Ava, just because it kind of gives me Beyond Good and Evil vibes. Like the game, basically, like you play as a character named Vic, and then her and her companion, her science exploration partner, they crash land on a planet, and their goal essentially is to preserve the animal life and the native species because the planet is infected by a sickness that is just constantly growing. You end up finding a staff that is a relic from a previous people that were on the planet. Mm-hmm. And the staff has the ability to disrupt the sickness from the living, as well as these like pods that kind of block your progress. So the staff itself replaces combat. Like there's no combat in the game. Okay. But if the enemies are infected, you basically have to lock onto them and let a bar fill up, and then that cures the sickness from them. And that if they're aggressive, you have to dodge and roll and whatever. Mm-hmm. So there's no combat.
So it's more like a puzzle in the sense of you're dodging things and making sure you don't get hit.
And like you can tame the monsters by using a flute or curing them of the sickness. But the ones that are just out and about, you can tame them using a flute, using a Simon Says kind of game. So if they whisper or if they make 5 notes, you make the same notes on the flute, and then they trust you. And then you can inhabit their body. Like you don't actually inhabit your body. You're just controlling the creature. And then those creatures allow you to break through and break through the progress. So it's like a Metroidvania in that respect, where this bridge is held up by these supports. I can't get to them, but if I make this little creature and go around, I can break them, and then the bridge goes down. So you have about 4 or 5 of those types of things spread out across like 20 creatures. So there's a lot of overlap on what creatures can do, which if they make a sequel, I would love it so that, the cat can do this, the dog can do that, the bird can do this, the rhino can do that. Like those types of things. Like I would rather see like those types of things where like you pull from those creatures to do unique things as opposed to the overlap. The story is pretty decent. It's written by Rhianna Pratchett. So people who know her, she wrote the Tomb Raider reboot. She wrote Mirror's Edge, Heavenly Sword. So like the story and the characters and stuff is really good. The voice acting is pretty decent. I think some of the animations are very The Sims, where like if a character's talking, whatever, and they're shocked, they'll do kind of like the same shocked animation that in like The Sims. So whenever that happens again, and she's like, "What?" And then later on, she's like, "What do you mean?" Like it's the same kind of.
It's always that, yeah.
It's always that stuff, and it's a small team and whatnot. There's a camera mechanic to take pictures of the animals, which allows you to know what they do. There's you use basically the lore that you discover as experience points, and that lets you build up certain things like reducing your cooldowns and all that kind of stuff. But it's not a bad game. It looks really, really good. The main hub area is really good. I think that the worlds that you explore around it are less impressive. Right? What?
I think this game's on Game Pass as well.
It is. It is on Game Pass. So I definitely do suggest checking it out for anybody that has Game Pass. It does a really good job at doing what it needs to do. It's the story is interesting, the characters are nice, the kind of like flirting it does with combat is interesting enough. And since again, like you have a staff like a bow staff kind of thing, whatever, you have a camera, so it gives me a lot of vibes of Beyond Good and Evil.
Yeah.
With it, without it being like, oh, this is just a Beyond Good and Evil clone. No, it's like little traces of that property here.
That's nice. That's nice.
And
I may check this one out. It sounds interesting.
It's short too. I think it's only like 10 or 12 hours.
Okay.
And the main hub world is where you're going to spend the most of your time. The locations you go to are a lot shorter, especially since you start to realize, oh, I need this creature for this, I need that creature for that, yada yada yada. But no, it's actually pretty good. I kept thinking for the longest time that I had a jetpack, so there's so many times where like I would hop down and go to use a jetpack and just realize like, right, I don't have a jetpack. But no, it is really worth checking out.
Nice. Well, you've also played a Star Wars game recently, but it's not the one that everyone's waiting for. It's one that maybe people have never played.
Yeah, so I've got 2 more games to talk about. So I'm going to talk about Star Wars Bounty Hunter. I never played the original. It was one of those Star Wars games that just escaped me. So back, I think it's 2002 when it came out. This game essentially, based off all the marketing materials, they're like, we've improved the camera. We've improved the visuals. We've improved the control scheme because originally you used the face buttons to shoot, not the triggers. So there are a lot of nice changes here in regards to like me having to approach the review in 2 halves.
Yeah.
One half is, what is this like as a remaster? And what is this like as a game right now? Because if you are coming into this being fresh and not having played the original, that's the most important part. If you are coming at it from a fan of the original, this is the most important part. So I think from a remake, I think it's fine. I think that the visual changes that they make are smart. I think the control scheme stuff is very clunky and finicky, but much better than the original one. You can play with the original control scheme, and it is absolutely mind-boggling.
Some games back then were awful with their controls.
Like the camera, like I don't know what they fixed on the camera, because there's times where like you'll go to make a jump or whatever, and then it'll instantly change mid-jump, and you have to kind of adjust. Yeah, like this game, like I mentioned in my review, is like if you're going to remaster a game, make sure the game was fun to begin with. Because if you are preserving that game as it was, and that's what this is, it's preserving what it was. It's not preserving a good game. It's preserving a game that does not play fun. So therefore, the end result, no matter what you're doing to it, makes a game that is not fun. Like there's zero signposting for the level design at all, period. There's some indication, there's no objective markers, there's absolutely nothing to guide you. So if there's a tiny little door in a dark little corner and that's where you need to progress, or if there's ledges on the outside of a cave wall that are not lit well,
you sound like
going there.
You sound like you've experienced these actual things.
The level design is painful, and when you have to platform, because like here's the thing, you get 5 lives per level. Or you have to start again. So if you die because of some stupid platforming thing and you don't know what you've done wrong, there are times where like I've had to redo like a 10, 15, 20-minute thing like several times because like the level design does not tell you kind of how to progress. So there's times where I felt like I've just brute forced where I needed to. So like it's one of those games where like it is designed incredibly poorly, and the remaster has done nothing to accommodate that. If the platforms on the cave wall that I need to go on that you can't see unless you're literally next to them, if they had just put like lights up above or something, or like just some indicator that I had to go up there, because they have these little like checkpoint markers.
Mm-hmm.
So if you put a checkpoint marker on the first platform, then I know where to go.
Yeah.
But if you put it just in this little area where like I literally had to watch like a video playthrough just to figure out that those platforms were even there because you can't
Wow.
see them. And like
That's crazy.
there's one where they got like a little tiny door like under this one little platform that honestly if you're so accustomed to the doors not opening.
Mm-hmm.
So when
Yeah.
you approach this one and it finally does open, that's where you're like, what are you doing here? Like it is, and I will say like the game gets infinitely harder, and like your armor feels just like tissue paper. Like you get blasted by anything, and like the Mandalorian show, it told me that like that armor is actually pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then like it's no freaking wonder Jango Fett died in the prequels, like to like one lightsaber slash. Like no freaking surprise. Like it's just and like the audio mixing, like the cutscenes are super low in volume, but the
Oh wow.
gameplay is super loud. So there are times where I literally basically will like grab my Switch and put it up to my ears so I can hear the audio during a cutscene, and then I will like pause
And
the
then
gameplay,
blow your
go
ear off.
online, watch the cutscene.
Yeah. That's crazy.
It is like, again, I think the intent there to preserve the original feeling is fine,
Mm-hmm.
but SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated remade the visuals and the gameplay to be fun with how
Mhm.
you remember them without
Yeah.
like, you know, with still preserving what those games were.
And
So I
also, I
think
think, there are other examples of like when you're not trying to necessarily do a visual overhaul and those kind of things, there are also good ways to preserve a game. For
yeah,
example, two games that I very much enjoy, Shenmue 1 and 2, they were re-released on modern platforms a few years ago before the third game came out.
yeah,
And they were originally going to receive more of a kind of remake remaster with new visuals and stuff, and in the end that didn't happen. But what they did do was they made good quality of life changes. So obviously you have the built-in things like faster load times, but they also gave you the ability to save anywhere in the game instead of having to go back to your house every time. So you could save at any point rather than having to wait and lose progress potentially, that kind of thing. And they focused on quality of life changes, but the game still looked and felt to play how it looked and felt at the time. And to me, that's the way. There's a difference between remastering slash remaking and preserving. And I think that preserving can be done very wrong because some people look at preserving an old experience as, oh, we'll just port it and that's fine. But it's like, it is, but the problem is certain things have also changed. So it's like, it's kind of like we heard today that the Dead Rising remake that's coming out, it's like they're changing certain things in that, which will
yeah,
no longer reward players for taking photos of women, essentially. Um, and it's like, but that's the right change to make. Like, even if you weren't remastering the game, if you were just re-releasing it as it was, you should still be removing that aspect of the game. Like, it's so there is a difference, and it sounds like with this one, what they've aimed to do is a kind of preservation job where they've made some quality of life changes but kept the game as it is. But what you're saying to me is the problem really is that the core game and the design of the core game had so many problems that just preserving it isn't good enough.
yeah. Because like you could still, I sent you a message on Discord if you want to check real quick.
Okay.
The, the problem is when you're preserving a game like that, you're preserving a lot of like the warts and everything. Like essentially, like it kind of like it's the same thing as like the Shadow Man remake that remaster that came out, is that it's still basically preserved like all of the wrong, like all of the bad game choices essentially of like what made that game kind of like not terribly great to begin with. And like the thing about it is like it I think the intent there is really good to like preserve it. I just kind of wish that they just would have made just some choices to kind of make that game just play a bit better.
Yeah.
Because again, like I love the fact that you can kind of have that preservation, but I mean, there's games that have done those remakes and still preserve the original games by having those original games like unlocked and there.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Let's hope that Outlaws is a better Star Wars game, because that one's coming soon. But before we end here, Jeff, do you want to speak about anything else quickly?
Yeah, so I'll kind of dive into this guy a little bit quicker than I was planning to. Gestalt, Steam, and Cinder. So this was a game that when it was coming out, I was hearing a lot of people say that they really, really enjoyed it. I was following this stuff on Twitter. And it wasn't until I actually beat the game that they realized that Dodger and Jesse Cox, they're producers on this game. I didn't notice that until the credits came up and I saw Brooke Lay, I saw her, Brooke Lay, what's her last name? I can't remember. Her name on there. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like, no wonder this game is so good, is because they got like two people that, you know, kind of know what they're doing when in regards to playing games and having a good opinion on them. So Gestalt, Steam and Cinder, or Cinder and Steam. I keep forgetting what it is. Steam and Cinder. This is kind of like a Metroidvania light. Like, it doesn't really have those types of things where it's blocking off huge chunks of the map due to abilities and stuff, but the map and exploration is very Metroidvania. And the game is just super fun. Combat and movement and everything you're doing on that game feel extremely good and extremely paced well. I think the areas, like the map is not massive in certain ways. You know, because like that Norea game that I played a while ago, the map was just way too big. This map here is very digestible. And honestly, the only things that I have negative to say on the game is that the bosses need a balance patch because they're very easy. No, like basically the story is essentially is that humanity's been kind of like wiped out almost to a point after they opened up this gate to like essentially the underworld. And then basically to combat the underworld, they used the powers that they got back down there to create this armor. And then those armored people then drove back the forces and they sealed the gate. But then those armored people became corrupted and they were stripped of their armor and then exiled.
Interesting.
And so basically you play as, I can't ever remember her name, like Arathenia or something like that, like one of those types of names. And you play, she's like a mercenary that kind of gets tied up in this storyline that's happening because there's the two sides essentially are kind of butting heads.
Nice.
And it's
Sounds
the story,
for sure.
The story and the characters are really good. The animation for like everything that this game offers is really, really good. Like even just the running animation for her is fantastic.
Yeah. And you'll have a full review for this one up on the site, I'm sure, right? So
yeah, like my plan is that by the end of this weekend, I should have Bounty Hunter and Gestalt up for reviews.
Well, there you go then. So by the time you're seeing this episode, there will be some reviews up on the site. I will link that one specifically below, so you can go and check it out.
Yeah.
Obviously, make sure you check out everything we do because we've had loads of news on the site recently as well. We will be here again next week. We'll probably look a little bit different, but yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed this episode. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and all that good stuff. But for now, it's a goodbye from me, and we will see you next time.
See you guys.